Good evening, everybody. Uneducated Economist here. So I want to apologize to everybody who has watched my previous video to this one. I'm going to go and delete that video here as soon as I get done with this one. I should have already done that already. I didn't realize that I had read inaccurately what I thought was the price of lumber futures. And just to kind of give you an idea, I was talking about a significant drop that had taken place in lumber prices, and I did not realize that because I was working all day, and so I was just kind of periodically looking at the prices. And at one point, I thought that there was something wrong with the price because of how low they had gone to. And at the end of the day, I saw that they were at like 730. I'm thinking, man, this is a huge drop in lumber future prices. I did the video, kind of talked a little bit about the Fed, and then went home and started reading, and I realized that I was looking at November's chart, November contracts, and not September's contracts. So September contracts had closed at 8:30 and not at 7:30, and that is really close to the all-time highs as far as the September close goes, and to think that they're anything less than that, like the prices have dropped, was just completely wrong. So I am really sorry about that, guys. I thought I was looking at the September contract, and I thought that it had dropped just significantly. And just as soon as I realized that it was November, I had to come out here and make this video. So anyway, I apologize, guys. I'm really sorry about that. So I hope you guys forgive me. And I'm going to go and delete that video here in just a little bit. What else? Oh, and yeah, and I also thought that Jackson Hole, I was just screwing up all day today. I also thought that the Jackson Hole meeting was taking place on Tuesday today, but it's actually Thursday, so it's day after tomorrow. So when I came home, I was thinking, okay, I was going to read up on some of that stuff, and it hasn't even taken place yet. So, I was really bad at my video today, and I apologize. Like I said, I'm going to go and delete it, because, there's just like completely inaccurate information as far as that goes. And I hope you guys forgive me for all that. Now, to make up for it, I thought I'd talk a little bit more about Canada and what was going on with the World Trade Organization. Because if you guys didn't hear, there was actually a pretty significant news came out yesterday talking about this. Now, what happened was that, and this is going back for a long time now. I remember hearing about like this lumber war spat between Canada and the United States going back for a long time. Now, I live in the Pacific Northwest, so lumber's a big deal up here, timber and all that, as far as the industries go. And this spat back and forth basically comes down to subsidies that the Canadian government is giving to the timber industry in order to make their lumber cheaper for exports. At least that's kind of what I'm getting at it from the gist of it. The United States finds that unfair, and what were they doing? Like anti-dumping regulations or whatever to keep Canada from dumping all this lumber on the United States for really cheap, cheaper than what would typically be competitive from these subsidies coming from the government. And the tariffs and duties that the United States has imposed on the Canadian lumber apparently was unjustified. I mean, I guess that's what the World Trade Organization, determined. And now I don't know a whole lot. I haven't read deeply into the decision process and what ultimately made this decision, by the World Trade Organization to determine that the United States had unfairly imposed these essentially taxes on Canadian lumber for the fact that they had it cheaper on account of the subsidies. They found that unjust and that they couldn't do it anymore, and they have to relieve these tariffs or taxes or duties or whatever it is that they have imposed on them. And that's kind of like what was taking place there with Canada and the World Trade Organization yesterday. So, if you think about what this could do for the imports coming into the United States. Now, you think about it, this was at least from the last one, the tariffs that Donald Trump's administration has put onto the Canadian lumber, it was like a 17% tariff. So even at 17%, and this is what I was talking about in the previous video, even at 17%, that's really not that significant. I mean, it is significant in an extreme way when you think about 17% to the cost of anything out there. But when you consider that lumber went from 250 per thousand all the way up to 850 per thousand, that 17% is really pretty insignificant on the grand scheme of things. I mean, when you get up to 850 and you add 17%, that's a lot of money, yeah. But when you think about like 17% at 250 takes you up to like what, 350? No, not even 350, 325, something like that. I mean, it's like it doesn't carry you that far as pricing goes. But when you think about like the amount of price increase that's taken place, that's pretty significant. So whether or not these tariffs are on or off, I don't think it's going to make a really big difference in the actual price of lumber. Now, the supply coming into the United States, that might change. Now, you think about it, Canada is a huge lumber producer, and there was a time like during 2015, 16, 17, we were importing a lot of Canadian lumber. And in turn, we were selling a lot of logs to China. So that was kind of like, what was taking place at the time is we were exporting a lot of logs and importing a lot of lumber from Canada. And then that all changed with the, old trade wars and everything else that was taking place across the world. Now, if Canada is able to start importing more lumber into the United States, that's going to add some more supply to things, and that ought to, put downward pressure on prices, right? Supply and demand. Now, the only thing is that Canada was kind of sitting in the same position anyway. They too have also curtailed a lot of development. They've had a lot of mills shut down, and they've had the area up in the British Columbia just really get devastated with the amount of mill closures and ultimately permanent closures that had taken place, not just the curtailments. So anyway, that is really what's taking place in lumber. So September contracts actually closed at 8:30, not at 7:30. November contracts closed at 7:30. Both of those were kind of up for the day, but I still feel that we may have seen a top in the lumber prices. Today we saw them dip back down just below 800 at some point. If you go and look at the charts throughout the day, there was a point that it was down under 800 per thousand, but yeah, it closed at 8:30 and not at 7:30. So sorry about that, guys. I really do appreciate it if you forgive me on that one. The only thing I can do is come out here and apologize, let you guys know right away that I made a mistake, and that I am coming out here to let you know that it is a mistake, and to please disregard the last video and the information that was in it. So, was there anything else I wanted to talk about? I don't know. I mean, I guess we'll talk more about the Fed and what they plan on doing, because really, I think the Federal Reserve, and this is one of the things that I was talking about in the last video too, but I really honestly think that the Federal Reserve is planning on coming out with a average inflation targeting. And this is where typically the Federal Reserve, for as long as I can remember, has always shot for 2% inflation. That's what their goal was. They were trying to hit 2%. And if they went over 2%, then they were trying to keep from, going above 2%. They were trying to be at 2% all the time. Well, the problem with the last 10 years is they've only got to the 2% inflation mark, at least by the way they do their calculations. They've only achieved this 2% inflation, just a couple of times out of the last 10 years. And so they're really not very good at achieving 2% inflation. But yet, there's talk coming out of the Federal Reserve about how they want to do this average inflation targeting, which basically is saying that they're going to overshoot inflation. They're going to try and make inflation run hotter than they typically would, and to keep it running hotter than they typically would for a longer extended period of time to try and bring up the average inflation. So since they have been under 2% for the last 10 years, they're going to go and try and keep inflation, keep the inflation running hot for an extended period to bring that average up to the 2%. And I guess, once they have achieved the 2% average inflation, then I don't know what their decision is to try and maintain an average 2% inflation is what I'm assuming. So that's what we're going to see coming out of the Federal Reserve, is that that's what their goal is. Now, I question how the hell are they going to even get 2% inflation if they can't achieve it in the last 10 years. How are they going to do it coming into the future? I mean, they have already dropped interest rates as low as they can possibly go without going negative. This typically is what they would use to try and stimulate the economy by getting the consumer out there taking out loans to go off there and buy cars and houses and take out debt to go on vacations. And this is like typical, Federal Reserve attempt at stimulating the economy, but they're out of room, they're out of bullets. So stimulating the consumer to go out there isn't really going to be that effective if you cannot drop interest rates any farther. So now what I feel that they are planning on doing is that at some point they are going to try and institute this digital dollar, this digital central bank digital currency. We're all going to have digital wallets, and they're going to inject money right into the system. They're basically going to sidestep all the banking system, all the loan processing, all that other stuff, and just give us money directly that we can go off there and consume into the economy and try and keep the growth happening, keep the inflation up and running. At least that's what I feel is going to happen. Now, if that takes place or not, I mean, who knows? But it certainly seems to be what they're leading towards, and I have a feeling that's what the Federal Reserve is going to be talking about when they come out of this Jackson Hole meeting. Anyway, Uneducated Economist. I'll leave links down in the description. You guys let me know.